I only came back to grab my laptop, but found 102 people yelling cheers in the vineyard. A banner read, "She said yes to Carlos." I asked what was going on. My mother smiled. "Your brother's engaged to Sofia, my ex." Then she added, "We used a €15,000 winery credit in your name, a gift." I clicked twice, said 5 words. One file, 102 guests, silence. I parked my car on the gravel road leading to the family vineyard, half distracted and cursing under my breath. My name is Nathan. I'm 33 years old, living in Lisbon, but I'd driven back to my family's estate in Sintra to grab the laptop I'd stupidly left behind last weekend. My plan was simple: get in, get out, and pretend the past didn't exist. But as I turned the corner past the old olive grove, my headlights lit up something that made my heart clench. Hundreds of people in bright summer clothes, their laughter echoing across the vines, and fairy lights strung up like 1,000 tiny stars above their heads. I stepped out of the car and just stood there, staring. A massive white banner flapped in the soft breeze, each word a punch to my chest. She said yes to Carlos. My brother's name in bold, red letters. And beside him, in smaller script, Sofia, my ex-girlfriend. I didn't know whether to laugh or be sick. My feet moved before my brain did, weaving between tables covered in white tablecloths, flickering candles, and the soft pop of champagne corks. The sweet scent of muscat grapes carried through the air, but it only made my stomach turn. "Nathan," my mother's voice cut through the noise. She appeared beside me, her hair done up and a forced smile on her face. She kissed my cheek like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't just driven a knife through my ribs. "Isn't this wonderful?" "Wonderful," I echoed, numb. My brother, Carlos, was across the crowd, lifting a glass as he held Sofia's hand. She was in a pale yellow dress, laughing like she'd never known a single hard day in her life. I managed to smile, tight, cold. "I just came to grab my laptop," I said, trying to sound casual. "Oh, that reminds me," she said, her tone bright and casual like she was commenting on the weather. "We had to take out a credit line from the supplier for the party, €15,000. It's in your name." My heart stopped. "In my name?" "Yes, dear. You know how these things go." "It was the easiest way. Family helping family," she said, brushing a crumb off my shoulder. Her voice was so calm, like she was talking about a grocery run. I didn't argue. Not there. Not in front of the 100 faces turned our way. Instead, I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling. A lifetime ago, I'd built a small app in college, a file transfer tool, simple and fast. Tonight, it became my lifeline. I found the file I'd prepared weeks earlier, just in case. How I lost my partner and got billed for the celebration. I attached receipts, texts, screenshots, bank statements, proof of everything they'd done in my name, behind my back. My thumb hovered for a second, then I sent it. A moment later, notifications started pinging across the tables as phones buzzed. Conversation stuttered. Laughter quieted. The fairy lights didn't dim, but the air shifted, like a storm rolling in from the hills. I looked up and saw Sofia's editor reading his phone, frowning. Carlos's business partner, a guy I'd met once at a trade show, had gone pale, his glass hanging forgotten in his hand. My mother's eyes met mine. "What did you do?" she whispered, her voice brittle now. I smiled, a real one this time, though it didn't reach my eyes. Just sending out a little story of my own. Then I turned and walked away, past the fairy lights, the laughter turning to low murmurs behind me. The sign over the party still said, "She said yes to Carlos." But now the crowd didn't seem so sure. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Back then, before all this blew up, I thought helping my family was just what you did. My father had nearly lost the vineyard once. Years ago, tax debts, a frost that killed half the grapes. I was 26, working 2 jobs in Lisbon, but I still wired him the money to cover the back taxes. It wasn't a loan. Not in our family. It was a contribution to the legacy. My mother called it, like I was paying dues in some club I hadn't even signed up for. I didn't complain. At the time, I figured maybe one day I'd inherit the vineyard. That's how it worked, right? You paid in, you took care of it, you belonged. Or at least that's what I told myself. When Carlos decided he wanted to distill port wine, I co-signed the license. He was always the charming one, good at talking people into dreams they couldn't afford. The bank loved him, but I was the one they trusted to back it up. The tasting room was falling apart. I spent every weekend for 6 months laying new tile and fixing the leaks in the roof. It wasn't a question. I'd been raised to think it was just what older brothers did. Carlos called me the fixer, like it was a compliment. And every time I asked about the money, when it would come back to me, or how we balance it out, my father would just say, "We're building something that will outlast us all." My mother would smile and add, "It's your birthright." A birthright that apparently included signing my name to everything, whether I wanted to or not. For months before the engagement party, my mother sat me down at the kitchen table. Sunlight slanted through the window, catching the dust in the air. She had her business voice on, the one she used when she was going to ask for something big. "Carlos wants to expand," she said, fingers drumming lightly on the table. "He needs a new piece of equipment, a press from Italy. He found a lease, but he needs you to co-sign." I stared at her. "Another co-sign? I've already got 3 loans in my name for this place." "It's just 10,000, she said, tilting her head like it was nothing. "You know how these things work. The suppliers want security. You're the reliable one." I hesitated, and she gave me that smile, soft and motherly, like I was still a kid asking for a cookie. It's only for a little while. You know Carlos's heart is in the right place. I wanted to believe that, so I told her I'd think about it. A week later, I got the lease approval notice in the mail. My signature was on it, clear and perfect, even though I'd never signed a damn thing. I turned the paper over in my hands, my mouth dry. I almost convinced myself it was some clerical mistake, a mix-up at the bank. But deep down, I knew. My mother had done it. She'd forged my name as easily as she'd written my permission slips for school trips when I was a kid. I didn't confront her right away. I sat with it. I told myself maybe she'd done it because she really believed it was what was best for the family. That maybe I was just being too sensitive, too protective of things like my name and my credit. But each time I tried to let it go, I thought of how easily she'd smiled when she told me about that €15,000 party loan in my name. How quick she was to act like it was just part of the legacy. The truth was, it had never been about family. It had always been about what they could get from me. It took me weeks to admit that, and once I did, I couldn't unsee it. Every small loan, every favor, every time they told me I was the responsible one, it all added up to this. A lifetime of being used. I thought about that as I walked through the vineyard the next day, my steps crunching on the gravel. I thought about every time I'd picked up the phone to smooth over some crisis my brother had caused. About every time my mother had said, "It's just business, Nathan," as though that made it okay. By the time I reached the old storage shed behind the vines, I had stopped telling myself stories about family. The door creaked open, the smell of must and old barrels wrapping around me. I leaned against the doorframe, staring at the dust motes dancing in the slant of light. I wasn't just the fixer. I was the one they'd chosen to carry it all, without asking if I even wanted to. The betrayal was slow, but it was complete. After the party, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the taste of betrayal sour in my mouth. It felt like the whole vineyard was pressing down on my chest. I couldn't breathe. I got up around 3 in the morning and turned on my laptop. The whir of the fan was the only sound in the dark kitchen. My fingers moved like they had a mind of their own, pulling up every document, every email, every scrap of paper tied to the vineyard and the family. I wanted to know exactly how far they'd gone, what else they'd signed my name to. It didn't take long to find it. Buried in an old folder on my desktop, a bank statement I hadn't paid attention to in months. A second €15,000 charge, this one marked for Harvest Proposal Celebration, the party, of course. But also a string of smaller charges, catering, flower arrangements, even the DJ. All billed to an account I didn't even know existed until that night. I felt sick. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I realized what this meant. My family hadn't just borrowed my name. They'd built an entire event on it. My brother's engagement, my ex-girlfriend's new future, all on my credit. I stared at the charges until the numbers blurred. My hand shook as I clicked through more records, checking for any other surprises. That's when I remembered Sophia. How she'd moved out of our shared apartment only 8 months earlier. How she'd said she needed space to figure things out. How I'd packed her boxes for her while she promised it wasn't about Carlos. It had never been about Carlos, she'd said, over and over again. I didn't want to believe she'd been lying then, but part of me already knew. I pulled up an old backup of my phone, the one I'd kept out of habit, the one I'd never thought I'd need. Her messages were still there. Her emails, too. I read them with a calm that scared me. 3 months before she moved out, she texted Carlos, "We shouldn't keep this a secret forever. It's not fair to Nathan." Another message a week later. "He still thinks I'm just focused on the publishing stuff. He's still paying for everything. God, I feel so guilty." I read those words over and over, my pulse a dull roar in my ears. I'd thought I was helping her chase a dream, paying for her tiny press, covering her rent while she wrote. All the while, she was playing me for a fool. I leaned back in the chair, the wood cold and hard against my shoulders. My heart felt like it was beating in the wrong rhythm. The betrayal was bigger than the party. It was everything: money, love, trust, twisted into something ugly. I saved the messages, took screenshots, filed them away. My brain was running on pure instinct. If they wanted to play games, I'd play too. But on my terms. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat at the kitchen table, the glow of the laptop the only light in the room. My thoughts ran in circles. But one thing was crystal clear. The truth was bigger than I'd let myself see. It wasn't just a loan in my name. It wasn't just an affair. It was years of me playing the reliable one while they wrote me out of my own life. I closed the laptop at sunrise. The world outside the window was gray and cold, the vineyard shrouded in mist. I felt hollow, but I also felt something else, a flicker of resolve. They'd stolen from me, lied to me, laughed at me behind my back, but I wasn't going to let them keep it. The next day, I did what I'd been too polite to do for years. I sent the file. I didn't care about the timing. I didn't care about the fallout. I just wanted the truth to be louder than the lies. The file was simple, just a single PDF titled, "How I Lost My Partner and Got Billed for the Celebration." Inside were screenshots of the messages between Carlos and Sophia, the forged loan contracts, the bank statements, every dirty little detail. I sent it to every guest at that party. My app, the one I'd built in college, let me do it in seconds. No one was left out. I watched the scene unfold from the edge of the vineyard, leaning against a gnarled old olive tree. The sun was setting, painting the vines in gold. But the party was unraveling in real time. Sophia's editor, a short woman in a green dress, was the first to react. She threw down her glass and stormed out, muttering something about professional standards. Carlos's business partners, two guys I barely knew, stood huddled in the courtyard, their voices sharp and angry. One of them jabbed a finger in Carlos's chest, the other shaking his head like he'd seen enough. I saw my father's face as he read the file. His brow furrowed, then his eyes darted up, searching for me in the crowd. He spotted me by the tree and started walking over, his shoulders squared like he was about to deliver a lecture. "Nathan," he said when he reached me, his voice low and calm, too calm. "What is this? Some sort of jealous sabotage?" I laughed, but there was nothing funny about any of it. "You're calling me jealous? You forged my name to pay for your lies." "It was just family business," he said, like that explained everything. "Carlos needed help. You know how this works." I pushed off the tree, straightening to look him dead in the eyes. "No," I said, my voice steady. "I know how this works now. And it ends here." He reached out, his hand almost gentle on my arm. "Nathan, let's not make a scene. Let's sit down and talk this through. If you touch me again," I said, my voice flat, "I'll call the police. And I'll file a report for identity theft." His hand dropped. The calm mask cracked for just a second, his mouth twisting like he wanted to spit out every word he'd swallowed over the years. But he didn't say anything else. He just stood there, breathing hard. I stepped past him, the air cold against my skin. The guests were still there, their faces pale in the fairy lights, the music long forgotten. Some of them were reading the file on their phones, others just staring at me like they didn't know what to believe. Carlos was at the center of it all, Sofia's hand clutched in his. His face was red, his jaw tight. He looked like a man caught in the headlights of a truth he never thought would find him. As I passed, he called out, "Nathan, wait." But I didn't stop. I didn't owe him a damn thing. Not after everything. I walked out of that vineyard with my head high. The last thing I saw was the fairy light swaying in the evening breeze. The banner that still read, "She said yes to Carlos," fluttering above the broken party. I didn't look back, not once. A few days after the party exploded, I got the text. My mother, as always, was trying to play peacemaker. "Let's have a nice dinner, Nathan," she wrote, like nothing had happened. "We need to talk this through as a family." I almost deleted it without answering, but I was tired of them thinking they could bury everything under a nice meal and force smiles. I told her fine. One dinner, one conversation. Then we were done. The night I drove back to the vineyard house, the road felt longer than I remembered. The vines were heavy with early summer growth, but they looked different to me now, like they were part of a world I didn't belong to anymore. My mother opened the door before I could even knock. She was wearing a soft blue sweater, her hair pulled back in that way that always used to make me feel safe. "Nathan," she said, her voice careful, like she was talking to a skittish animal. "Thank you for coming." I didn't answer. I just stepped inside. The dining room looked the same as it always did. Heavy oak table, worn from decades of meals and arguments. My father was already seated at the head, his shoulders stiff. Carlos sat across from him, his face pale but his jaw tight. Sofia's absence was the only thing that felt different. My mother motioned to a chair at the far end. "Sit down, Nathan. Let's have a calm conversation." I pulled out a folder and dropped it on the table. "Before we eat," I said, "you're going to look at this." Carlos flinched, but he didn't say anything. My father's lips pressed into a thin line. My mother reached out like she was going to open the folder, but I stopped her. "I'm going to walk you through it," I said, my voice quiet, "because I want no confusion." I opened the folder and laid out the first page. My forged signature on the equipment lease. My father's name is the witness. The bank's surveillance photos showing him signing it in my name. "You stole my signature," I said, my hand steady even though my heart was racing. "You used my name to get what you wanted." My father looked at the paper like it was a foreign language. "Nathan, it wasn't like that," he started. "We were going to pay it back." "That's not the point," I said, my voice rising. "You didn't even ask. You took." My mother was blinking back tears, her hands folded tight in her lap. "We thought it was for the best. We thought." I cut her off. "You thought you could just keep using me because I wouldn't fight back. Well, that's done now." I flipped to the next page. Screenshots of Sofia and Carlos's messages, proof of their affair before she moved out. My mother's eyes flicked over the lines, her breath hitching. Carlos dropped his gaze, his fingers drumming on the table. "She was with him the whole time," I said, "and you all knew it. Or you didn't care enough to find out." My father's jaw tightened. "This is family business. It's not for outsiders." "I'm not an outsider," I snapped. "I'm your son, but you treated me like a tool. Like a wallet." The last page was the final blow. A bank notice freezing the vineyard's credit line because of the fraud investigation I'd opened. "You're cut off," I said, leaning back in my chair. "No more credit. No more money. No more me." My mother let out a small, broken sound. "Nathan, please." "No," I said, standing up. "I'm done." I looked at Carlos, who was still staring at the papers like he couldn't believe any of it was real. "You did this," I said. "You lied. You stole. And now you're going to live with it." My father stood, his chair scraping the floor. "You think you're better than us?" he said, his voice low and shaking. "You think you're so righteous?" I didn't answer. I just gathered up the papers and walked to the door. My mother called after me, her voice breaking. "Nathan, don't do this. We're family." I paused in the doorway, turning back to look at them one last time. Not anymore. Then I left, the echo of the slammed door ringing in my ears. A couple of days after the dinner, I was at my apartment in Lisbon, finally breathing easier, when I got a call I didn't expect. It was Mateo, Sofia's ex-boyfriend, the one she'd dated before me, years back. I hadn't seen him in what felt like a lifetime. Can we talk? He asked, his voice low. It's about everything that's been happening. I hesitated, then said yes. We met at a small cafe near the river, where the air smelled like salt and the tourists drifted by in small clusters. Mateo looked older than I remembered, his hair a little thinner, his face a little more lined, but his eyes were steady. He didn't bother with small talk. I heard about what happened at the vineyard, he said. Carlos, the loans, all of it. I nodded. It's a mess, but it's over now. He pulled out a small, battered folder from his bag and slid it across the table to me. Not quite. Sophia was seeing me while she was with you, and while she was with Carlos. I stared at the folder. You're sure? He gave a grim smile. Positive. She told me herself when we were still talking last year. She said she didn't know how to end it with either of you, that she didn't want to hurt anyone. I opened the folder. Inside were texts and photos, dates, times, hotel receipts, proof that Sophia hadn't just been playing me. She'd been playing all of us. My hands tightened around the edges of the papers. Why are you giving this to me? I asked, my throat tight. Because I'm done, he said simply. I'm not here for revenge. I just want peace. And I thought you deserved the truth, too. For a long time, we just sat there, the quiet hum of the cafe around us. I felt strangely calm. It wasn't that it didn't hurt. God, it did. But seeing it all laid out in black and white felt like closing a door I'd been stuck behind for years. I handed the folder back to him. Thank you, I said, my voice low. This helps. Mateo nodded. I'm moving on, Nathan. I think you should too. She's not worth any more of our time. I watched him leave, the folder still clutched in his hands. And for the first time since this whole mess started, I felt something like relief. There were no more secrets, no more half-truths, just facts, and the chance to finally let go. Later that night, I sat in my apartment, staring out at the city lights. My phone buzzed with a final message from Carlos. She left. I hope you're proud. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Mateo was right. This was my chance to let go of the anger and the bitterness, to stop carrying their lies like they were mine to bear. So I closed my phone, leaned back in my chair, and let the silence wash over me. A week after that final message from Carlos, I decided it was time to finish what I'd started. I wasn't going to let their reach pull me back in. I wasn't going to be the fixer anymore. First, I called the lawyer who'd helped me get the Vineyard credit line frozen. I want to finalize everything, I told her. Sever every link, every account, every insurance policy, everything. It took hours, calls, emails, paperwork that felt endless. But I didn't stop. I wanted it done. I wanted them to know there was no more Nathan to lean on. I closed the joint insurance policy I'd shared with Carlos for the tasting room. I transferred the winery-linked credit cards to new accounts, ones with my name only. Every time I signed a new document, I felt a piece of their hold on me snap away. I went to the bank in person for the final piece, the family trust. My father's name was still on it, still tangled up with mine like a chain around my neck. I sat across from the banker, my signature steady as I signed the papers to remove myself. I'm sure, I told her when she asked. It's done. After that, I moved into a new place in Lisbon, a sleek, modern condo in the city center, with clean lines and big windows that let in the light. No vines, no old oak tables, no echoes of family dinners I wasn't really part of, just mine. I spent the first night there deleting every shared login from my old life, streaming accounts, credit apps, family plans on my phone. I changed my number, updated my email, even changed the locks on my emergency contacts. No one from that house would have a way back in. Carlos's car had been sitting in the vineyard driveway for weeks. I'd paid for it, another family expense I'd never agreed to. I called a local charity and had it towed away, donated in his name. When the paperwork came in, I smiled. One more thing they couldn't touch. I didn't tell anyone in the family where I was living now. I didn't know them that. A part of me thought I'd feel guilty, like I'd crossed some line that couldn't be undone. But as I stood in my new kitchen, drinking coffee in the quiet, I realized I felt lighter than I had in years. This was mine, my space, my life. I'd spent years letting them decide what family meant, what loyalty meant. But that was done now. I was done. The weeks after I cut them off were quiet, almost too quiet. For the first time in my life, no one was calling to ask for help. No one was telling me how family meant sacrifice, or how I should be proud to give everything up. My mother tried, of course. She left letters in the mailbox of my new apartment, notes written in her tidy, looping script. Nathan, please, you can't just shut us out, one said. This is tearing the family apart. Another was shorter. We didn't mean to hurt you. Come home. I read them once, and then put them in a box, shoving it into the back of my closet. I wasn't ready to throw them away, but I wasn't ready to read them again, either. Carlos tried to. He called once, then twice, then stopped. The last message he left was short and sharp. She left. I hope you're proud. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Sophia disappeared. Word reached me through mutual friends that she'd gone to Paris, or maybe Berlin. I didn't really care. She'd made her choices. She could live with them, just like I was learning to live with mine. I started filling the silence with things I'd never had time for. Traveling solo, just me, a backpack, and a camera. I spent a week in Porto, wandering down alleys older than my family's lies. I hiked in the Douro Valley, the wind on my face, no one telling me I owed them anything. I read more too, Books that had been gathering dust on my shelf for years. Philosophy, fiction, even a couple of corny self-help books. Anything that helped me feel like I was building something that was mine, not just patching up everyone else's messes. One night, I hired a private investigator. It felt dramatic, but I wanted to be sure. I gave her every scrap of data I had, signatures, emails, old bank records, and told her to find out if my family was still trying to use my name. She called back a few weeks later. "You're clean," she said. "No new accounts, no suspicious activity. Whatever hold they had, it's gone." I thanked her and hung up, letting out a long breath I didn't know I'd been holding. I took one last step that night. I had the family trust legally revised, cutting them out entirely. No access to my name, my money, or my future. Just me. Finally, the next morning, I woke up to another letter from my mother. I didn't open it. I just dropped it in the box with the others. The final message I got from Carlos came late at night, like he couldn't bring himself to say it in the daylight. "She left. I hope you're proud." I stared at it for a long time, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Then I put my phone down and walked away. No reply, no explanation, no more apologies. I was done. A month after cutting them off completely, I moved into the final piece of my new life, my apartment in Lisbon's Alfama district. It was a small place, 2 rooms and a balcony that overlooked the tiled rooftops and narrow streets, but it felt like freedom. I spent the first few days unpacking in silence, my hands moving slow and careful over things I hadn't seen in years. Old photo albums, dusty notebooks, a chipped coffee mug from college. Each item felt like a piece of a life I'd been too busy holding together for everyone else. The last thing I unpacked was a small metal sign I'd had custom-made in the city. Black letters on brushed steel, stark and unmissable, "No visitors. Family does not reside here." I mounted it next to the door, the screws biting into the plaster. When I stepped back to look at it, something inside me settled. It wasn't meant to be cruel. It was just the truth. A line in the sand that said, "I'm done. I'm not your fixer anymore." Inside, I updated my emergency contacts one final time. When the form asked for a next of kin, I wrote in the name of my lawyer. When they asked for a backup, I wrote, "None." I didn't feel lonely. I felt safe. Every time someone knocked on my door after that, I checked the sign. No visitors, no family, just me. And that was enough.